Hi, this is Dan Reimold from College Media Matters, also the author of the upcoming book Journalism of Ideas, Brainstorming, Developing, and Selling Stories in the Digital Age. Just a screenshot here from the Amazon page. I'm excited to say the book is being called, quote, an instant classic and, quote, the next new mandatory text for college journalists. So if you're an aspiring or veteran journalist listening in here, the book is aimed basically at providing you, quite simply, with a ton of story ideas and a slew of innovative exercises and other forms of inspiration to help you brainstorm and dig up some ideas of your own. One unique selling point I just want to throw out there is that it specifically features hundreds of ideas linked to student news outlets at colleges and universities across the country and in a few other places. Just great work, and all of it published or posted over the past few semesters. Okay, so in that spirit, this very quick Journalism of Ideas podcast, simply a glimpse at a few especially fascinating, newsworthy, I think one or two slightly quirky stories and features that have premiered over the past few days, give or take, within the student press. And I'll also toss in a few thoughts on how to digitize them, flesh them out, and adapt them for your own campus. And the very basic hope here is that maybe you'll come away with an idea or two for your own student news outlet. So I'll have all the links to the featured posts here and featured stories and some of the other ciders that I threw up, just things I was thinking about as I was going through the stories themselves. And I'll have also things mentioned on the YouTube channel as well if you're accessing it through here. So the first one, just something I spotted in the Vermont Cynic at the University of Vermont. Poor Melvin. This is a beaver who was being studied by students at UVM, who by chance was actually killed due to some physical plant staffers' activity attempting to stop water levels rising on campus in the woods due to some beaver damming, and so they were setting some traps, and poor old Melvin was actually killed in one of these traps. He had been tagged at the time, if I'm remembering the story correctly that I just looked through. And just really a sad story here, and that's our friend Melvin, who has now gone to a better beaver place, hopefully. And with no sarcasm here, it is kind of fascinating in leading into possibly an adapted story on your own campus. First, which simply how outside animals are dealt with. I see this a ton as someone who reads way too many student press pieces of various semi-wild and extremely wild creatures getting onto campus, causing some problems, or simply kind of becoming a part of the vibe of campus. I mean, a fun post that I put up recently on College Media Matters at collegemediamatters.com is just the amount of student press squirrel stories. And how the squirrels just really do their thing. They get onto campus and really become part of many areas of campus life at a lot of schools, as you'll just see through a quick run through here. Also see a lot of bears and deer and various things. Kind of fascinating at times how they become part of the campus scene. Also simply how they are dealt with. The one that I definitely recall is at Binghamton University, a story the Pipe Dream had a while back, in which the university was trying to decide how to take care of the growing deer population that I guess was invading campus and starting to cause an issue. And at one point they were going to be shot in the head by sharpshooters to make their death immediate. That was the meaning of the sort of vague headline there about culling the campus deer. Along with dealing with the animals, though, sort of interesting, just the idea of how animals interact with campus in other ways. Again, just a funny headline that I thought of as I was taking a look at poor Melvin's tale. In this case, this was something that ran on a blog run by the Diamondback at the University of Maryland. The fact that an SGA event brought puppies to campus to interact with students right before finals time, to give them a tiny bit of a stress reliever and just a good laugh, prior to all the exam madness. You often see, animals at different events on campus, and also, of course, students actually having pets, either illegal, more than likely, or at certain schools or in certain situations, and maybe even off-campus residences, legal pets that, again, become part of their college experience and may lead into an interesting story. I've even seen them a lot on different campuses I've been on, in which seeing eye dogs are helping, blind or visually impaired students and staff, and maybe handicapped as well in various, capacities. And so there's a variety of ways which animal stories could come into play. And then obviously, most related to Melvin's tale is the idea of how animals are interacting with student research. I definitely think a worthy story to jump into, possibly see what's up. What's the latest in the science labs? All the way down to the microscopic creatures, to possibly, the more full-blooded, domesticated and wild animals that we're seeing, like our boy Melvin here. What uses are they being put through? What are the lab conditions in which they are being housed? And what are how do the students bond with them in various capacities? I think that would be kind of interesting. And I even would throw out one non-living animal story that's possible. Something I always mention at the conferences I present at on various story idea sessions is to always think stuffed animals. Similar to student tattoos, almost every student, male or female, has some sort of stuffed animal that is with them in their campus residence or off-campus apartment. Maybe it's from a significant other, maybe it's from a loved one, maybe it's tied to a childhood story back home. But there's always a story with it, and I've seen a few student papers really take advantage of those stories and tell them well. From a new media perspective, I would simply say, see if you can get access to the honing equipment that actually tracks some of these animals that have been tagged in real time. I don't know what the privacy issues are potentially there or what the legal ramifications are, but it might be interesting to see how someone like Melvin or maybe the deer that are being tracked or the squirrels are actually roving around campus and where they're setting up shop. Okay, another type of story, this one in the Reporter at the Rochester Institute of Technology at RIT, great publication out there. This ran fairly recently, looking at the retention rate at the school. They're fairly incredible at RIT. If I'm remembering right as I'm looking through this, it's something like almost 90% of students who enter freshman year, and I do see this here, stayed for their second year, at least a few years back. That's pretty phenomenal, versus some other info I've seen at different schools. They're looking at how that is actually done, how are students retained, and also obviously what happens, when students decide to go elsewhere. And they've put together a few interesting infographics here that break it down, at least in their online version of the story. And it is quite an interesting in-depth feature. And I also think it touches on an area of student enrollment and admissions that is often forgotten in student press stories. You often see the admission stories, the entering freshman class, the orientation, obviously during enrollment time and admissions acceptance time, decision-making time, you see a lot of stories. But retention plays a part as well and is really a big concern, or in this case, I would think with RIT, a real achievement to brag about, when it comes to looking ahead to the next academic year. And so it might be interesting to take a look at students that you are losing after either freshman or maybe sophomore years on your campus. Might be interesting to look at the opposite of that, of students who are transferring in and what has led them to the school. And I would even think it was one more thing that made me think of a piece I did for my campus beat column for USA Today College, another regular piece of writing that I do. Also looking at dropouts. There are a number of students who are not going elsewhere when they leave your school, but simply are unable to finish. And this is a Reuters report that I wanted to highlight to make sure I'd remember to mention it here. Most parents expect college to be a 4-year financial commitment. It has become so common for undergrads to stretch out their college years that only about a third of students who set out to graduate in 4 years actually do so. And then I have here, in my own words, the number of students leaving school prior to graduation has actually risen so dramatically in recent years that, as I cite a source here, the U.S. now boasts the highest college dropout rate in the industrialized world. And the interesting thing about this is, these students have stories, and they don't necessarily have to be deemed failures. And it is something that I originally got the idea for this piece based on a column written by the online editor of the Mooring Mast at Pacific Lutheran University, who was finally graduating, if I'm remembering correctly, I guess it was last spring, after dealing with some issues and dropping out for a time, again, if I'm remembering that correctly at this moment. And as he mentions here, why do dropouts have to be seen as failures? Why is graduating college the only way to be seen as a success? In some ways you think, well, duh, because the point is to finish. But, he mentions that he got a ton of experiences out of it and was able to save some debt for a while. And, there's a human being under there, not simply someone who either gets the degree and succeeds or doesn't and fails. And so it might be interesting in all those ways. Look at the students you're losing, look at the students who are transferring in, and look at the students who you are losing in the dropout sense and what's going on with them. The one multimedia tip I would offer here is, along with the great infographic inspiration that you see here from the reporter, I would also think a video mashup, maybe man on the street style of taking a look at, in real student words and, with their faces front and center to the camera, talking about why they decided to leave the school. I think that would be very interesting and telling, possibly very engaging to your audience. All right, 3 more real quick here. One in the Observer, I believe at Fordham University. Just an interesting, I think, idea for a regular feature. This is one they call office hours. And so this is a typical professor. This one ran last month. I believe there's been at least one more since then. They've run a few of these now, where they simply take a look inside a professor's office with the professor's full permission and cooperation. In this case, looking at the quotes on the walls, looking at the clothing the professor's wearing, I guess because in this case she was especially known for that a little bit, the various posters and other things hanging about, accessories, accoutrements. In this case, again, also interacting. So the idea is it's taking a look at the office, but obviously the key is through the office taking a look at the professor. And so a book she read recently, I guess she has a standout lamp here, and some photo albums and other things. Interesting feature. You often don't see professors enough in the student paper, in student news outlets, especially when it's not related to them giving a detached quote about some event that they helped sponsor. I think this lets people in, and picking the right professors and doing this in the right way. Be careful of snarkiness or undercutting, especially professors on tenure track. I think you can really reach out to a new segment, and I think also allow students to see the professors as human. I really do think it's an everyone wins scenario here, and it would be interesting as well to get just a mini snippet of, for example, this professor on camera talking a bit about something that's been highlighted here. Maybe it's one of the photo albums or one of the quotes that means something to them. In this case, I think just a 30-second either audio or video snippet I think would really go wonders. The second to last one here real quick, just an editorial that I saw in the review that caught my eye, in this case from earlier this month, at the University of Delaware, talking about the idea that in this case, at UD, there is a vague policy surrounding whether it's okay for students to, let's just say, take a look at old exams being given by professors who are teaching the course the student is now in, prior to the students then taking the, I would hope, updated exam. Sometimes students get copies of these old exams. They're given back with the, the grades and the markings on them, in various forms, either digitally or the paper copy. And I guess these things, linger and could possibly be used as either a study instrument, or I guess the idea here with why there needs to be a policy potentially that they're calling for is, whether it can be used for academic dishonesty or straight up cheating. I do think this leads to a number of interesting story ideas. Is there a policy at your school about the use of old exams? Do professors, what are the professors' MOs here? Do they go out of their way to continue to update their materials? Are they overly concerned now with the digital age? Do some professors simply not care? Are there other methods involved? It'd also be interesting to see how much of a trend this actually is. Is the use of old exams or any type of assignments, other materials, being given to students who are following in other students' steads in various classes actually an issue? And is it something that your school needs to know about and possibly address? And then there's obviously the deeper issue of possibly a back and forth debate in the op-ed section of whether this is actually cheating or whether the impetus should be on the professor to be updating the materials and understand that, hey, these things are going to get spread around. I would throw out there, again, not really clear on the ethical implications, but depending on your school's policy and if it's considered A-OK, of possibly starting a full-bore exam house of sorts online in which you are linking to PDFs or other things of old exams, maybe old assignments, maybe even syllabi. Again, don't do that without first looking at what it would mean for your school, and maybe I'm a little pie in the sky on this, but it is part of the idea of reaching out and being more of a full service shop than simply, reporting the news. Could kind of lead to an interesting idea. I do think that idea needs to be more fully formed. And then finally, one of the most cliche types of stories, especially as we're segueing into soon enough graduation season in about a month. We're going to see the April Fool's stuff in about a week, and then it's going to be graduation season fun. Are the campus bucket lists, maybe just the general college bucket lists. The things that you have to do on your campus or simply as a student before you graduate, to make sure that you're making the most of the college experience. This interesting piece in the state news at Michigan State University that's getting a lot of attention, as you can see, at least on Facebook, the number of likes and also a bunch of comments, puts that on its head. And in this case, I really love this piece by Greg and Katie. It takes a look at things that they feel students will not miss once graduating, in this case specifically from Michigan State, which by all accounts from what I hear is really a terrific school. The two that made me giggle is their first one here, of the fact that I guess an especially cold place, like Lansing, Michigan, waiting around the block at one of the bars you're hopefully legally accessing can be a bit of a pain in the winter weather. And then the other, if I'm remembering, is toward the bottom here, just the idea of 8 a.m. classes. And they even bring up the point about grading for attendance being stupid. That's a whole other set of stories depending. But, I don't think 8 a.m. classes are something that most students will miss. And so it's something to think about, maybe especially as graduation time is approaching. Might be fun, and even as a staff bonding exercise, if nothing else, to simply throw out the notion of not what you need to do before you graduate, but what you won't miss after you're gone. Okay, so that is all for now. Again, just throwing up sincere thanks for listening in here to my College Media Matters Journalism of Ideas podcast. Check out the links on my blog or on the YouTube channel to see these stories for yourself, and be sure to check out the next edition of the Journalism of Ideas podcast. Please tweet or email me anytime with ideas you'd like to see added to the podcast. So again, this is Dan Reimold with College Media Matters and Journalism of Ideas. Thanks for tuning in.